Good morning. Welcome to GCP RITE's final meeting of the RITE HRIT Roundtable. My name is Courtney Diorio. I'm the Executive Director of RITE and the Senior Director of Tech Talent for the Greater Cleveland Partnership. We're delighted to be with all of you today. I know from the registrations, we have some familiar faces as well as some new faces. And I am going to be turning it over soon to one of our co-chairs. However, I am at the moment just making sure that my screen is visible to all. I trust, Julie, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Good morning.
And Julie, if you could do a cross-check, do you see my screen clearly?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. I have a blinking something and I just wanted to make sure that wasn't visible to all. So thank you all. We're really excited to have you here. And we're going to be diving into a substantive discussion soon with our keynote speaker. But for now, I would like to turn it over to our co-chair, Julie Weiser.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Julie Weiser. I'm a Senior Manager of Human Resources and Talent Acquisition at Brand Muscle, and excited to get us kicked off today. Courtney, can you advance the slides? I'm still seeing the cover slide.
Okay. And what are you seeing now?
There we go, the agenda.
Perfect.
All right, great. So yes, today, Courtney and our co-chair Siggy, John, and I, as well as other team members and guests, will share some information, but we will start by just updating on HRIT Roundtable and some of the things that we've been doing and where we anticipate that we're going to go. Then we will have a keynote speaker sharing some excellent information about the industry, and then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So just to get started, we want to talk about what the HRIT Roundtable is. So the HRIT Roundtable is a network. So first and foremost, we want to give an opportunity to all of our participants to create a network, share best practices, and get an opportunity to develop relationships across the industry. We are all working towards the same unified approach of really lessening the gap between the demand for technology talent and the supply of technology talent. So we're working on driving short-term hiring needs, driving diversity, and using some really creative approaches to be able to drive this process. So we have some exciting things going on, including some workforce pilots that we hope that we'll be able to scale into regional solutions that can really help to, again, lessen this gap that we're all experiencing. So that's really where we've been with HRIT Roundtable. We've been working for a few years right now and really getting into the meat of promoting some of our pilots and getting them off the ground. So I'm going to turn it over to Courtney to do a little bit of a recap of what we've been doing in 2020.
Thank you, Julie.
Of course.
So for all of us, I think we have appreciated the opportunity to convene despite the inability to convene in person. We did agree to carry forward our convenings of the HRIT Roundtable as soon as the pandemic in March started to impact all of us. So we did have, I believe we had 3 peer-to-peer calls over the span of several months, just to, again, leverage this platform as an opportunity for those of you who are on the front lines of talent acquisition and human resources to really talk about the kinds of things that you were experiencing and the realities you were facing in your roles at your companies. Talked a lot about how to virtualize internships and really what the implications of remote work, which obviously continues to unfold across all of our workplaces. We also had an opportunity, Julie just mentioned that the group has been working towards the development of some pilots that would help us reach out to non-traditional populations for IT roles. And we had an opportunity to discuss some of our ideas and get some feedback from the Northeast Ohio CIO Forum that is operated by GCP Tech. We had an opportunity to talk about the IT sector partnership, which you are going to hear about momentarily from our new managing director, and to elicit some feedback that John Flynn will share a little bit later in the business meeting for the HRIT Roundtable. We also, as many of you know, celebrated Tech Week at the end of August, and we had a number of programs for regional employers as well as students and job seekers that were very successful. We had two things in particular of note. One was a B2B workshop featuring organizations that have been particularly successful at recruiting veterans into their IT roles, into their overall workforce. We had creating tech pathways for veterans. And then we also launched a new program called RITE Steps to an IT Career, which was designed for job seekers who may be interested in pivoting into IT as a career and what the possible pathways for them could be depending on their interests. And that went over very well as an addition. Last but not least, as a part of the Tech Week rollout, we also joined forces with longtime partner Team Neo and their research team to produce two complimentary reports, all of which are available to you on our website. The first is the RITE Talent Bulletin, which is an update and reflection of some insights that we were able to generate through a collaboration last year with Connexus and a survey that we did with regional employers. We also, with Team Neo, they produced the Navigating the Next Normal, which really talked about IT employment overall and some of the trends and how it has served to be a buffer for some of the job losses and some of the manufacturing sector in particular. And then last but not least is the again, formal release of the results of the survey we did last year with Connexus. Again, all are available on our website, ohiorite.com, under what we know. So if you're interested in any of those reports, feel free to go there. And then last but not least, one of the most significant developments for GCP RITE and the broader RITE community is the designation as the intermediary for the Workforce Connect IT sector partnership. And I am going to turn it over to my colleague, my new colleague, Craig Platt, who is the managing director of the IT sector partnership, is just getting rolling. And he will tell you a little bit about this initiative and your company's ability to participate. Craig?
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Craig Platt. I'm the managing director of the Workforce Connect IT Sector Partnership. And this is a very strategic partnership initiated by the Workforce Funders Group. And it's got two primary focuses. And it's to address the critical shortage of IT talent for employers, but also doing it in an inclusive and equitable way. The populations of African Americans, women, Hispanics, and Latinos is underrepresented in the IT community. And that's a great talent pipeline that we're not taking advantage of. So the idea of the sector partnership is to make a systemic ecosystem improvement in how we develop talent for the workforce employers to take advantage of this talent. And we're doing it by leveraging best practices. And the best practice is an industry sector partnership. We're actually the third one that is being funded by the Workforce Funders Group. The manufacturing sector partnership started about 2 years ago, and the healthcare one started about 6 months ago. So not only are we leveraging best practices from across the country, we're also leveraging best practices and lessons learned from those two sector partnerships that preceded us. The great advantage that we have, as Courtney said, RITE is our intermediary. So as we look at bringing employers to the table to understand what their needs are, and in terms of what the barriers are to inclusiveness and equity, we also have RITE, which is going to help us bring the workforce service providers to the table, as well as human service providers, as well as educational service providers, so we can attack this problem as a partnership. So we'll be launching initially on December 9th, and then really picking up the steam, working with our leadership team in January. So it's an honor and privilege to be on this call and to address such an important need for both the business community and also the community in which we live and work. Thanks, Courtney.
Thank you, Craig. So with that, I'm going to shift gears and just talk about very high level briefly where we're headed in 2021 in terms of our meeting schedule, and very much bridging from what Craig just shared with you. The HRIT Roundtable will play an integral role in the rollout of the IT sector partnership. We're very excited about that. And so we have adjusted our schedule of meetings. Generally, we are quarterly. I did add an additional meeting in March to coincide with the timeline of the IT sector partnership. So we at least had a placehold for a meeting that could serve that purpose more strategically. So you will be getting invitations or opportunities to register for these before the end of the year, particularly the January meeting. And not surprisingly, one of our primary areas of focus will be delving deep into diversity and tech. One of the first things we are going to do is make sure that members of the HRIT Roundtable are well versed in what GCP's Equity and Inclusion Division has been doing with employers for 15 years. I would suspect many of the companies on this call may be aware of this assessment. It is an annual assessment and a process that we will be leveraging as we move forward to not only drive greater performance accountability, but also to, as Craig said, really lift up and scale the kinds of best practices that we know we can operationalize to great effect in our region and within our companies. So please stay tuned for invitations. We welcome those of you who consider yourselves to be leaders in this space. And I would be remiss if I didn't say, if you are more interested in, or if you're interested in learning more about the IT sector partnership, please don't hesitate to reach out to Craig directly. There are opportunities for your CIOs or chief technology officers to be a part of the leadership team. And so Craig can certainly share with you and your colleagues more information about that. He can be reached at cplatt, P-L-A-T-T, at gcpartnership.com. So with that, we're going to shift gears and get ourselves into the meat of the presentation today. And I'm going to turn it over to John Flynn, another co-chair of the Roundtable.
Good morning, everyone. We wanted to talk a bit. We have been developing a dashboard. The RITE Leadership Board has been developing a dashboard. And the dashboard's really built around and vetted out our KPIs. What are we trying to do? What are we trying to measure? And what are we focused on? We're actively building a system currently to capture this data, because today, much of the data has come from us as employers directly through surveys and things like that, which is it's somewhat subjective, and it's harder to capture some of that data. But you can see here a little bit of what we're focused on and what we're trying to measure. We were able, in a recent CIO forum, to take a quick poll on the topic of the CIOs participating. You can see here how they support our targets. Their survey was almost 82%. It was very clearly aligned to what we're trying to measure. So this gave us a lot of support. We were excited about that. However, the ongoing gathering of this data is not going to be easy. It's not easy to get our hands on some of this data. So as we begin to round out our meetings this year, as we go into next year, we are going to be taking a look at how we gather data and the frameworks we need to gather data. It is going to be a continued challenge for us to get our hands on the proper data as we try and measure these KPIs. And then, back to Craig's point, really get an opportunity to influence the communities in which we work and live, and provide additional opportunity to great careers that we know exist within IT. Next up, my co-chair or partner, Siggy Berman. I'll let you take it away.
Hi everyone, Siggy Berman. I'm the Technical Talent Acquisition Manager at Sherwin-Williams, and I have the pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker, Michelle Whiten. Michelle has over 20 years of human resources and organization development experience across various industries, including manufacturing, banking, insurance, and healthcare. Michelle currently serves as the Chief Talent Officer at Life Bank. Prior to Life Bank, she spent 7 years at Medical Service Company, a $40 million home medical equipment provider. She served as Vice President of Organizational Development. Her proven leadership in talent management, development, and business acumen earned her an HR Business Leader Award in 2016 and has contributed to growth at every organization she's been part of. Michelle has earned a bachelor's and master's degree from Baldwin Wallace University in HR management. And outside of work, Michelle's married. She's a mother of 3 amazing boys and enjoys wine. I think all of us are enjoying a little bit more wine due to COVID. Golf, traveling, and just hanging out with her family and her friends. So welcome, Michelle, to the HRIT Roundtable.
Well, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the introduction and for allowing me to be part of today's presentation. I'm making sure that everybody can see my screen. Is everyone able to see the measuring the immeasurable screen slide?
Michelle, no, it doesn't seem like it.
Not yet.
Because I have dual monitors, so of course this is what's gonna happen, right? I'm going to try this one, see if this works.
There we go.
So now you can see the measuring the, I had to switch my screens. Everyone can see the slide deck here?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Again, thank you for the introduction and allowing me to be part of today's roundtable discussions. We'll be going through the presentation this morning. And if you should have any questions, I'll probably be answering a lot of questions at the very end of the presentation today, or you can throw them in the chat box and we can also address those at the end as well. So I guess to get started, and everybody can hear me okay. Just want to make sure I'm good.
You're good.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, so for today's agenda, we're going over a multitude of and a lot of information, but going through and knowing your workforce and your business and how it relates back into the HR realm for recruitment and learning and development, and also learning how to take inventory of what you have today so that you can learn what efforts you need to put into the future to make things a little better. So we'll talk a little bit about more taking different types of inventory, what you have today. We'll talk about hiring and selection. We'll talk about onboarding, performance management, compensation, engagement, turnover. We'll talk about workforce planning and then also with training. With my years of HR and OD experience, the one thing that, living in the space of the people aspect of the business. The one thing that I've learned, and it is sometimes very difficult to measure some of those immeasurable things like, perception, correlation, sometimes the dollars, the time spent. So I have, over many course of the years here with HR and OD, I've learned how can we actually measure many of those things that we sometimes find to be immeasurable. So hopefully you'll find, you'll walk away today through the agenda and the many things that we'll talk about, walk away with just a few things that maybe you can take back to your organizations to help, fight your fight when, you're trying to turn those gut feelings into numbers and presenting that to your senior leaders or your boss. To hopefully make change that is going to be better for your workforce. And again, there's a lot of information here. We'll move through some of the stuff a little bit quickly, but again, we'll be answering some questions at the very end, should you have any. So the first thing is really from an HR standpoint, again, being at the seat of the table for many years, reporting to CEOs and really understanding my role as HR and OD, or the organizational development role within every organization. To be a very proficient HR practitioner, you really have to understand the business. We all have strategic plans. We all have our goals, our KPIs, and our job as HR is to make sure that it is our workforce that is getting us to meet those strategic goals and plans. And so for an HR person, you really do have to understand the business, just the fundamental portion of the business, of understanding those external business conditions and those forces. Like, what is impacting our business today? Therefore, how does that relate, obviously, to our internal strategic plan and or direction for our future? And then understanding then what are those strategic plans and directions internally is then what are those KPIs, those key performance indicators, to making sure that we are actually meeting or heading in the right direction or trending in the right direction to meet those strategic plan items and or direction. So really understanding those KPIs, again, understanding the purpose and what really matters into that internal business is really, really key for an HR practitioner. Because at the very end, we need that workforce that has both the capacity and the capability in order to meet those and achieve those KPIs. So then therefore, again, we can improve our performance on our strategic plan and or direction. Then we as HR practitioners say to ourselves, then what do we need from those external workforce needs in order to meet those workforce capability and capacity needs? And again, crafting a lot of our HR direction and needs to hopefully, again, meet the overall business and organizational needs. So it really is integrating the people side of the business with the actual purpose of our organizations that we work for. So again, some of the external impacts that I think we need to be mindful of is, again, those external business conditions and those forces, understanding regulations, competitors, community, industry, and economics. It sounds strange that an HR person would have to know all of this, but it does make us more credible when we're speaking about some of the needs that our workforce actually needs. So to tie and relate it back to those external forces really does heighten the awareness and also provides us the ability to be more credible as we are pitching our ideas or making recommendations. The external workforce needs, it is changing, it's ever evolving, and we do need it as HR practitioners to stay abreast of really what is those external force needs, and currently today, having and making sure that our workforce has meaningful work. It's work-life balance. I particularly like life-work balance, as I think that we need to put life before work, but really understanding what those needs are of our workforce between, especially now, what are those life-work balance needs, benefits, competitive pay, career development, all those special perks and rewards and recognition. These are really some high-level expectations You know, when we're going out and searching and hiring and selecting those external workforce to bring them internally, these things we really need to hone in on, because this is what our candidates are looking for. And to make sure that we're engaging our workforce to improve our retention, these are things we do need to be mindful of as moving forward. Again, knowing your workforce, just in 30,000 foot view, really understanding all those elements that make up your current internal workforce. It could be by age, generation, gender, years of service, leadership versus non-leadership, by function, by segments. Because with a lot of different types of data that you can pull, you can run different analysis on the different segments of your workforce that could be very impactful. So just understanding, again, what these different splits are on your workforce can help you, again, relate some of these items that we'll go through today, and understanding how is it affecting our workforce? What do we need to be mindful of our workforce? You know, whether it's, you know, a diversity, inclusion, and equity perspective. What does our workforce look like? Do we have a number of people who are going to be retiring, you know, very soon? And what does that look like for workforce planning? You know, by function, knowing our large segment of our population can be very important as well, for benefits, for compensation. So it really is relative to know that 30,000 foot view and splits of your workforce before, again, it's just taking inventory of what you have internally today, so that you can set up some parameters and maybe what we want to look like for tomorrow. Again, knowing your business, it is really very important to understand those strategic directions. What's important, you know, to our business? What challenges are we facing today as it relates to our workforce? And do we need to change our direction with selection and hiring, again, to meet those capacity changes or capability changes? You know, who are we looking for in order to meet that? The business activity, key performance indicators, the financial aspect. You know, I come across a lot of HR practitioners who don't either understand it, don't believe its value, or don't feel it's their, you know, responsibility to start digging in through the financials of a business. But as an HR person, you really do need to understand what is, you know, the balance sheet and profit and, you know, investments and all of those, again, and how it relates back to our workforce is really, really important. So understanding your financials and those key financial indicators that you as an organization watch is very important to understand and know what they are. And again, knowing what is critical for your business, what partnerships, the customers, the stakeholders, again, is very important as you're trying to increase your credibility in order to, again, start making the changes and the needed changes for our future in order for you to be a little bit more articulate and, again, tying business back with the people aspect of your role. So here are the next few slides. We're going to go through what I call is kind of taking inventory. Again, you're going to understand what your workforce looks like from a 30,000 foot view as you're understanding the splits of your current workforce, but then looking at the different perspectives of the HR realm and what it means back into that workforce. And again, taking that inventory, understanding you have to understand what you're doing today in order to make meaningful and thoughtful changes for the future as you start to really dive in and start to kind of pick apart the HR processes, practices, and policies. You have to really understand what does it look like today, and again, to make those meaningful changes in the future. So I know that when I had started LifeBank here about 2 years ago, a lot of these frameworks really did help give a perspective on what we're doing today, again, to make those changes for the future. So here's one really great framework, the candidate experience of really understanding the very fundamentals and the beginning stages for the hiring and selection process. You know, and understanding each stages and understanding what we're doing in each one of those stages and how can we make improvements, and where do we need to make improvements. Again, if it's the phone screen or the interviewing selection process that you're finding that is either taking too long, it's ineffective, or it's not efficient, you have to first understand what you're doing today, again, to make it better for the future. You have to also understand is what you need to keep. You also don't want to disrupt things that are working today. And where are the areas you need to just make some improvements, or things you need to stop doing because it's either ineffective or inefficient. So again, just taking this particular framework and understanding where it all begins from the talent acquisition side can be very meaningful, and to understand where you are today. Another inventory is the employee life cycle model. Again, this is pretty much a full scope of from, I guess, birth to the transition out, or the death of an employee, if you will, as they exit out, really understanding, again, the attraction, which is more of the, how are we bringing them in? The selection process, again, understanding how are we selecting our folks? What criteria are we using? Are we selecting the right folks? Do we have the right assessments in to help us make a better selection for bringing our workforce in from the external world into the internal part of the organization? Through the onboarding, what does your onboarding look like? Our onboarding is a very important part, as the onboarding really is to improve our engagement. It is to improve performance during their onboarding. It also helps shorten that time to productivity, which that's why you're hiring them, is to be fully productive at some point. And then also to increase the retention. So what does your onboarding, that 12-month look for our employees as we onboard, and what does that look like? And again, what are we or are not doing during their onboarding that, again, can either be more efficient or effective through the process? What are we doing for the development and performance of our employees currently today to either increase mobility for them internally, and are we improving in performance for the organization over time? What are we doing for the retention and the engagement of our staff? What does your performance management look like? What does your rewards and recognition programs look like? What perks are you offering? How do we manage our compensation philosophy? So these are all things that you need to, again, be cognizant of currently what you're doing today. And then most importantly, again, the death of an employee is the transition. And I'll talk about that, turnover is going to exist in all organizations. You'd be remiss to think that you're going to be able to retain all employees all the time, as you are hiring folks. It is an unrealistic expectation. So you will transition folks. It is how you transition them. What are your processes for transitioning employees out of your organization also is really critical to understand as well. So again, this is just another model that you can do to take some inventory of what you're doing today through the employee life cycle model. One very important key, I get white paper after white paper. The word employee engagement is a huge buzzword in the HR realm. What are you doing, again, currently today in understanding your employee engagement framework is really important. Where are you in your organization today from a level of commitment to the engagement of your employees and your workforce? Your engagement is how they feel about working for your organization, which is very different from job satisfaction. Job satisfaction and engagement are sometimes believed to be synonymous, and they are not. Job satisfaction is how they feel about their work, their job. Engagement is how they feel about working for your organization, which that is the power, that's the extrapolation of getting the best out of your employees, again, to help your business meet the needs of their strategic plan and their directions and their KPIs. So the engagement really is how do they feel about your organization, and really understanding where your level of commitment is today, and how can you work to improve that engagement over time, again, by doing and measuring some of those immeasurables and making a plea, from top down of what really engagement is, what does it look like, and how can we improve that over time, because that is a high directly correlated into your overall ability to meet your business needs. I came across this actually just a few years ago, which it was an ambassador framework. And it really does talk about from an individual need, and some of those elements that are really important on an individual basis for your workforce. And some of those things like feeling that they have autonomy, opportunity, and their impact and connectivity. As an individual, what does that look like through their onboarding, their learning, their performance management, and their recruiting process? So if those elements are really important to the individual need of most of our workforce, what are we doing to impact each one of those areas through their onboarding process, their learning, performance, and recruiting? This just gives you a different perspective of what's important, and again, what are we doing today to meet the needs of some of those workforce requirements. So again, it's just another easy way, looking at things a little differently, posing different questions so that you can be very mindful and looking at your organization and what you're doing today a little differently. So to get in some of, after you kind of understand the business, you're understanding workforce needs, external forces, your strategic plan, your 30,000-foot view of your workforce, and then taking a lot of those inventories, then you can really start to dive in on some of those data sets that we're going to look at here today of things that you can start to look at within your organization today, and start tying in some of these data points back into your area, so that you can again start making a craftful and more articulate plea to those, the senior leadership, again, to make some meaningful changes as you move forward. So here are some of the things we'll talk about that are probably important to track throughout the duration of the hiring and selection process. So we'll talk about these 5 areas here. So this is not anything new. Hopefully you are, looking into what the difference is between time to hire and time to fill. And also you can be tracking your time to productivity, which also measures how long it takes to actually get that new employee through the onboarding process trained so they can be the most impactful in their role. So this is very important, and actually just came into play in my organization. So a really good example is that we have an employee who is going to be retiring in January of 2022. So when we're going through our budgeting process, knowing that that position is going to be vacated due to a retirement, this information is very helpful from knowing when it's going to affect your budget, and when in fact you need to start that recruiting and selection process in order for that person to come into the organization when the time is necessary. So a good example is that we know that this position is going to take about 6 months to actually get these people up to speed from a time to productivity standpoint. And so knowing that we need this person in basically July of 2021 to start their onboarding process to make them most effective come January of 2022. But then to back up a little further, knowing that it's going to take 60 days to actually recruit for this position and actually get them to start. And you would only know that information if you track your time to hire and time to fill. So again, we know that in April of May of 2021, that we would actually have to start the process for the recruitment of this position. Again, knowing that the end game is that we need them up to speed by that January of 2022. So this is really a fundamental, capture of data that is really important for workforce planning purposes, and also to know for your getting a proactive approach from when to know and how to recruit for an opening when it is a planned attempt. New hire retention, year over year, when we look at the new hire retention rate, the way, we actually capture this data is looking at a rolling 12-month time frame and knowing, are we making impact and favorable impact to our new hire retention through all of those onboarding pieces and parts, and, are we retaining them? It takes a lot of time and attention to recruit and to bring people in. So their onboarding is kind of that first impression, and are we making it the best and the most efficient and the most effective, and again, as you're making changes, are those changes showing to be a favorable remark to our retention rate? And again, if you're not retaining the new hires, why is it? And you can only, again, know and understand your new hire retention by tracking it. And again, we do this by looking at a 12-month rolling forward or backwards to understanding, again, that retention rate. So looking at the combination for internal mobility, again, the internal fill rate, promotion rate, and new versus replacement. It really is important to understand what internal mobility, how is it important? Again, if you look at the requirements of your workforce today, that internal mobility, the development, career development is a huge piece when you're talking to candidates. For recruitment purposes, the three main elements that your candidates are really focusing in is their compensation, their benefits, and their career development. Where can I go? How are you going to develop me as an individual? How can I move forward? Those are three really critical things that candidates look for in, as they're trying to be selective on what organizations they join. So understanding that internal mobility within your organization is really key to be able to, again, articulate it or to make improvements on your internal mobility, knowing that is a key requirement for candidates. So again, very simplistic a way of looking at internal mobility is tracking, what are your new positions versus, that you're bringing in new to the organizations that you're creating because there either is a new capacity need or there is a different capability need. So what are the new jobs that are available to your workforce? And again, understanding what are you replacing them with? Is it a replacement both internally or externally filled? And looking in when you are filling those internal needs, the internal fill to then understanding the breakdown, is it through promotion or is it through a transfer? Looking at where are our people going, and as new opportunities or even replacements come up, are we preparing our folks today to internally fill those openings that we do have, and how are we doing that is again through either promotions and or transfers. And if you aren't internally filling a lot of your positions today with your internal workforce as it sits today, you really need to look at, how are you actually encouraging, how are you developing your workforce, again, to create those promotional opportunities or transfers into different parts of the organization. And when you're looking at onboarding, again, it is really key to understanding and creating awareness during the onboarding process. Again, it is from a leader to the employee. It is us getting to know them getting to know us, and more importantly, getting them up to productivity while engaging them through this process. Because again, the whole purpose of onboarding, is to improve their engagement, again, improving their performance over time, shortening that time to productivity, and increasing retention throughout this process. Nothing worse than spending all this time and energy and money and resources to finding the candidates, bringing them in, only to have them leave a short period after is devastating. It's devastating to the organization, the hiring manager, and to HR. You know, so how can we again do the best we can, bringing them on, more importantly, and creating this first impression that really does improve the engagement and performance of those employees. So how do you create, and what do you create in order to improve that? You know, and we, through our new hire survey process, you know, we at LifeBank, we do a 30-day, a 90-day, and 180-day survey. And each one of those increments and surveys that we put out to our new hires, you know, during that 12-month period, it really does ask different questions because they are faced with different things throughout their process of orientation. But we really do hone in, you know, in the first 30 days, we ask them about, you know, the hiring and selection process, and did you feel welcomed into your organization? Your 90-day is more about, you know, again, how do you feel about your training? How is it going? Are you getting the resources you need? Have you been doing your performance reviews with your hiring manager, again, to attest to the performance during different intervals of your onboarding? And we also ask, you know, how do you feel, has your team welcomed you, you know, to the organization? And then by about 6 months, we really should start to feel, you know, are you comfortable in your role? Have you been provided the training to make you most effective? Do you feel that, again, you know, you've made a really great decision still at 6 months of joining this organization? Again, keeping your pulse on their engagement through the onboarding process is really key. But also the key to a survey is also to give the feedback to your managers. This is it's an evolving situation, and it's one thing to collect this data, but it is another thing not to share that with your manager. And if you're starting to see new hire engagement levels dip throughout this process, that leader needs to know so they can address it with that staff member before you lose them. So again, understanding what's really key through the onboarding, and that really is measuring their performance as well. But you can only measure the performance of it and making sure that the managers are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. And again, at LifeBank, we do the new hire reviews at 30, 90 day, and 180 day to make sure that they are, you know, heading in the right direction, again, to cut down their time to productivity. And making sure they're headed in the right direction for their performance to make them the most effective in the very end. Because again, that's why we've hired them. But the managers have to be doing these reviews to make that the most impactful. So again, making sure you're keeping track of these reviews being done and done in a timely fashion. Performance management. Again, this is one of those areas where, you know, is it the gut? What is the perception versus the reality? And here are some things that you can do to actually put pen to paper and show some data points that could really be very impactful as you're trying to put that gut feeling into data points. The one thing that we do here also before we start talking about performance management is creating that top performer philosophy. You know, when you're talking to candidates, the one thing they need to understand is, what do I have to do to be, you know, successful in your organization? Your current employees need to know what they need to be doing to be successful in your organization. And this is different for everybody. This is probably a topic for a different day, but creating a top performer philosophy, if you don't already have one, I would recommend, what is it useful for? And again, bleeding this top performer philosophy through your performance management systems, your compensation philosophy, your rewards and recognition systems. It does help align your performance of your employees, again, to what is necessary and needed for your organization's success. So the one thing here is a bell curve. Again, when you're understanding the perceptions of the manager's performance of their employees versus the employee's own perception of their own performance. Tracking, what does that look like? So by just doing a very simplistic standard deviation analysis and putting this again to paper and data sets. So what you see here is as part of our performance management system, employees have the ability to do a self-assessment. And obviously the our managers are assessing them on the exact same data sets through their performance reviews. So what you see here is the perception difference between a manager and an employee, and how aligned are they, and your top performers need to know that they are doing well. And it is just as important that your bottom 10% or those who are lacking in performance know that they are lacking in performance as well. So this is a really great way. So what you're seeing here is that clearly our managers have rated some of our employees to be the top or the bottom percentage of performance in that bottom 10%. And our employees don't clearly know that they are not performing, and that is a disaster. And your best employees need to know that these are your top performers, and they need to know that they are top performers. They can continue that. And it is, again, just as important to know that your bottom 10% know that they are not also performing as well. And for purposes of also this point of data information is that you need to also track year over year that bottom 10%, because you need to know, what are we doing? Do you have employees that are on that bottom 10% year over year over year? And that is not helping anybody. That is not helping the individual. It's not helping that team, and is definitely not helping that organization. That bottom 10%, there's a choice. They either need to be transitioned out because they cannot do the job, or they need to be developed up in order to do their job. But until you can put this type of analysis together and show individuals that you need to do something with this bottom 10%, it's hard to make that plea unless you have like some information such as this. The one thing we also do for those, we're all in Northeast Ohio, we're part of the ERC, and we always enter into the North Coast 99 survey and application process. And here you got to know who your top performers are. That is really important to know, is who is really your top performers, and year over year of understanding, is it the same people? Are there top performers that have dropped off of a top performer, and understanding why is really important as well. So what you see here is just the two data sets between these 2 years of what your manager scores are. Because in the end, it is the good saying is you're only as good as your manager says you are. But at the end of the day, it's your managers who are assessing performance that really, it's where the rubber meets the road. And understanding, what you want to see year over year on this particular bell curve is a slow and favorable progression towards an improvement of that kind of standard or that average. Because that means that you are improving your organization little by little in the right direction. If you are starting to see if your average scores dipping, that is a need for understanding what really is impacting it, and why are we seeing the organizational performance move unfavorably versus favorably. Again, you want to see improvement year over year. That's the learning part of the organization. That is the development part of that organization. And if you can overlay these data sets and you can start to see organizational improvement, you must be doing something right. And if you're not, you've got to understand what's not working. Again, this is just that organizational performance over, again, a period of time, looking at the different quartiles. And where are you seeing the movements on these quartiles from the bottom, 10% to the, that core of 80% versus that the top performer, and where are you seeing movements can really help. Again, from this particular data set, you can see that the good thing is that bottom 10% percentile, that 2.90 range, you can see it, kind of staying the same, but it's increasing in that last year. So clearly, what are we doing, again, to make those improvements for those who were lying in those bottom 10%? And as well as you can see also here that median, you're seeing a little bit slight dip in their performance over time. And again, what's happening there? And there could be many reasons as to why, but you just got to dive in as to what that, specific thing may be doing to impact your performance. Compensation and compensation structure testing. Again, very important to understand if you don't have a compensation philosophy currently in your organization, it's probably a good idea to start to dive in again of what you're doing, what your compensation philosophy is, so you can start mapping some of the practices you hold internally in HR to make sure that you're meeting those compensation philosophy, because everybody wants to know how they can, earn more money. Everybody does. And so to be able to articulate that compensation philosophy and to understand what is most meaningful really can help, again, align what you're doing in those internal practices. So a merit matrix, again, we use a merit matrix. It's a best practice. If you're not doing this today, it may be something that you may want to look into for your organization, so you can also track this as you are implementing it and utilizing it during your performance review process. And then again, utilizing it and then testing it. Is it working? And what you see here today, in the very bottom portion of that is I go in and I test, are our employees or our managers utilizing the merit matrix the way it stands today, so that we make sure that we are, in fact, overlaying that performance or that pay for performance philosophy that we have, and making sure that we're utilizing our rating systems, we're utilizing, that overall score in relation to their comp ratio to make sure that, again, we are encouraging and implementing that pay for performance philosophy. So again, it's one thing to implement it and another thing to test it. Is it working? And again, when you're using everything all those tools that you have, you should get a bell distribution that looks of a normal distribution, as you've seen in an earlier slide through that bell curve distribution. Comp structure testing, I won't go into much, but you can do this. I have done this recently. You can actually do an analysis or a regression analysis that really does test. This is a high-level regression analysis to understand the correlation of data and understanding the compensation. If you have a compensation structure and you can test it, meaning what are we paying people today and what is it highly correlated to? And you can see I use data sets like gender, year of service, total experience, their compensation or the comp ratio today. So really understanding what are we paying our folks today and what is it most correlated to? And when I ran the analysis, it is looking at it's that p-value you see there, which is, again, I won't go into much detail and you can research how to do this because it is a little complicated, but the basic, it is important to understand, that p-value, and when you're running the correlation of what they're currently made today along these data sets, it shows here that it is the total year of service that is the most highly correlated to what they're being paid. And anybody knows here, when you're looking at a range, the more years of experience that you have should put you further in the range, obviously increasing your comp ratio. And that is what, to be competitive, that is what you should be paying your folks. And so this told us and told me when I ran this regression analysis is what our people are being paid today is highly correlated to what their years of service is, meaning also the year of service and the experience they bring to the table. So some areas that you can analyze for engagement. We do this every year, January, February timeframe. I'm all about simplicity, making it easy to administer, making it easy for your employees to complete it, making it easy to interpret, and making it easy to track. You know, the Gallup Q12 is a very simple but very highly impactful, full of information engagement survey that we do. And again, we are very transparent with the results. I am transparent, again, just talking about those top performers that you're tracking, you know, going back to those top performers and asking additional questions when those Q12 survey results coming back. Those are the people who you really want to stay in tuned with and keep those pulses on. And this is how, you know, through the engagement survey, I go back to those top performers with those additional questions, again, to really dive in to understand and get root cause analysis of, you know, making impactful and meaningful, you know, solutions or recommendations to make a better tomorrow. But Q12 is a great, again, very simple, can be done in-house, systematic way of, you know, testing out and the engagement of your staff. And again, tracking it over time, you know, looking at where we were, where we're going. This is also a great way to know exactly what you're doing, things that you're implementing, and again, is it really making an impact to these overall Q12 survey results over time is very important to understand. Local, state, and national surveys, as I mentioned, for those, you know, organizations that, you know, do not maybe enroll in any kind, it could do the plain dealer, it could be the best in Ohio type of surveys. I know that we use the North Coast 99 through the ERC. They do a great job. It is really a great way of, again, understanding what your climate is for your workforce. And again, it is easy, it is simple, it can be trackable. The reports that are provided are amazing, even if you don't think you can win. I know in my first year at LifeBank, you know, I didn't know whether we were or were not going to win, but it didn't matter. You always have to have a starting point. And they, you know, with the North Coast 99 survey and the results and the reports they provide, this is a great starting point. Again, it's a great way to put those gut feelings or what you think is your perception or trying to make correlations. This is a great starting point, and it can be really impactful, you know, as you are, again, making those pleas to senior leadership team and tracking it over time. I found it to be extremely valuable. Again, if you're not doing it, you may want to look into doing some level of surveys for your organizations to be able to put pen to paper. Again, a team assessment. Again, for anybody who isn't familiar with Patrick Lencioni, his the 5 dysfunctions of a team. There's an element of a survey that's part of this. It's, again, easy to understand, easy to implement, easy to track. I recently have done this actually when I joined LifeBank. I did actually this with our leadership team. So again, you can roll this out on a team basis, organizational basis, but again, very easy, very simple. And again, it is just something that any HR practitioner can grab a hold of and implement into their organizations. Again, when you're looking at the team aspect portion of your workforce. Quick tip for Q12 and 5 dysfunctions, you know, have the leaders, I did do this, you know, when you're talking about perception versus reality, especially for Q12, 5 dysfunctions, very easy. I actually had our leadership go through a practice. And before I even did the Q12, especially even before rolling out the results, I had our leadership actually write down what they thought our employees were going to say before I even gave them the results. So when you want to talk about and really bring to the forefront of perception versus reality, This is a great way of really putting it out there. You can't deny it. And I, as an HR practitioner over the years, you get a lot of the senior leadership, well, that can't be, well, that's not my take on it. That's not my opinion. We're not saying that. And it could be, you could have some pleasant surprises, meaning it could be really low and it's actually really high, and that's a pleasant surprise. But you also want to really know blind spots, and identifying blind spots is a great way by doing this perception versus reality activity with your leadership before you actually roll out the results. So combination of engagement with hiring and selection process, again, of understanding that employee referral program activity, of knowing, again, how many referrals are coming in. Employees, when you see your referrals going up or down, employees want other people to work there or will refer others when their engagement levels are high. No current employee is going to refer somebody if they don't feel good about their organization. So tracking your referrals, and then tracking, the referrals that are made versus being hired, but also the conversion rate of those being hired and their retention. So what's the program of those conversions of being hired, but more importantly, what is the retention of those referrals that are made? I'm a big believer, if your referral system isn't working, I mean, you're not retaining them, there's something wrong with the referral process. But there's also a really great way, especially, recruitment and hiring and selection process. According to this data that we have collected, when you are retaining 100% of the referrals made, or a very high percentage of those referrals made into your organization, you should have a great way of positioning yourself to say, we need to pay a $500, referral bonus, a $1,000, referral bonus, because if all those referrals being made and you can retain them over a 12-month period of time, it's a great way to say we need to beef up our referrals. We have to beef up our referral bonus to our employees because clearly it's working. Or, you could, if your referral process isn't working and you're not retaining them and you're paying out $1,000, maybe you need to reduce that because clearly you don't want to be paying a lot of money or resources when it's not working. So it's a great way to track those levels of engagement from your current, obviously, into that hiring and selection process. Turnover is one of those, first generation. Everyone tracks turnover. Everyone tracks turnovers for different reasons: demographics, tenure, by department. So these are some of the basic functions of turnover, and analyzing them are important. To really understand, again, what is affecting your organization and why are people transitioning out. I have a little different view of turnover, again, knowing that it is going to happen. It is unrealistic that turnover is not going to happen over time, and for different reasons. People may not work out, and not every organization is for every person, and not every person is made for every organization. So turnover is going to happen. People's needs over time is going to happen. And so therefore, since organizations can't be the everything for everybody all the time, and as employees' needs change, there's going to be turnover. So what I typically look at, and again, knowing that resources and time is really important to understand, I look at the turnover combination to really understand where should I put my efforts. So when I look at the total turnover of your organization, you have the desirable versus undesirable. You have people in your organization that you want them to leave. You want them to leave. They're not working out. They have behavioral issues. They can't do their job, whatever the case may be. I am not going to focus my energy knowing that, through the total turnover, that desirables are going to leave, and I want them to leave. So I'm not going to expend a lot of my energy on those, understanding why the desirables have left. I may spend some time on why the undesirables have left. But again, breaking that down again, versus of the undesirables that are leaving, the controllable versus the uncontrollable. There are things that affect our business that are uncontrollable. We have folks that work 20, they work 24s. And at some point, it does not work for their family life. It becomes difficult, and we know that. That doesn't work for a lot of work-life balance. And so we know they're going to have some uncontrollable turnover due to our staffing, but we're not changing our staffing, criteria. So again, I'm not going to expend my time and energy on why the uncontrollables have left. So then when you take the controllables and then again, breaking it down between top performers and non-top performers. So what I'm really interested in knowing at the end of the day, why the undesirables, those who could be controllable, and the top performers have left. That is who you really want to spend your time analyzing and understanding. Why are they leaving, and what are they, and what could we have done, and talking about that internally with their hiring managers to really understand what could we have done, because some things are in our control and some things are not. And you really want to be mindful of where you're spending your time. Workforce planning, I won't spend a lot of time, but really from a workforce planning perspective is, understanding, it extrapolates, your budget to your actual head count, understanding hours and time and overtime, and if you're running a lot of overtime hours, is it okay or is it not okay? Or can you actually increase your staffing or your head count so they can offset the overtime hours, or vice versa? Are you overstaffed? So again, from an HR practitioner, you can really understand the workforce planning perspective when understanding your budget to actual head count versus overtime and regular hours, and how does that, again, overlay into the workforce planning process, especially for the recruitment and selection or the recruitment purposes. Again, when you're understanding your business activity, again, how do you relate that back to your headcount? Again, are you overstaffed? Are you understaffed? And again, looking at this and going back to your senior leadership team to say, listen, is it okay that we're running these overtime hours? Should we hire a new person? Or again, are we overstaffed based on hours? And again, do we need to align or reduce our workforce through either attrition or downsizing? Again, being proactive in those steps versus, reactive. This is a great way of keeping in tune on business activity and how that relates to your staffing model. Training and development, again, very important to understand, what are you doing currently today, tracking those hours, from internal and external training, because is it really making an impact? Is it increasing mobility? Are we increasing our training and development efforts? And again, how is it impacting? Do our people feel that our training and development activity is actually making an impact for them, either on their job or through career development? Are we preparing them for our future? And again, are you putting more dollars in, but it's really not making an impact on your organization? So really tracking a lot of this, again, making correlations, again, back into your workforce through surveys. Again, you only know something when you can track it. And again, this is a great way of tracking your training and development efforts and dollars being spent. This looks like a very busy slide because it is very busy. But comp ratio is very important when you're understanding your training and development efforts. Again, when you're putting pen to paper, and again, understanding what data you can pull, what tools can you use and what programs can you recommend? Really the ultimate way of getting a buy-in is how do you tell the story with numbers? And again, if you're using your comp structure and those ranges appropriately, the best practice of those ranges, meaning you have your 80% at the minimum, your midpoint's at 100, and your maximum as 120, and paying folks for their experiences throughout their stages of their career, from that early stage of career to mid-career to late career, what does that look like for your entire organization? Again, this is a great way of understanding what do your training and efforts need to be. If a lot of your folks are sitting towards the minimum, they're in that early stages of their career, you know, your investment really needs to be in those in-house trainers, the very specific in-job training and more general training of your population, because again, formal versus informal is very different on their splits. They need more job-specific training. And so again, do you want to buy your talent or do you want to train the talent? And so when they're sitting in those early career stages, the investment is really in those in-house trainers, because these are very early stage career individuals, so you need to train them more for the job. Then again, as you move through, you got mid-career to late career, you know, and how do you use those late career individuals? You know, could they be subject matter experts? Could they be mentors? Could they be your in-house trainers for those people who are really in that early career stages? So it's really kind of, again, putting pen to paper and telling a story of where actually do your training and development efforts actually need to be pointed based upon what your workforce splits are between, you know, again, when you're looking at the different splits of where they are in their career. They could really help you tell that story and again, make meaningful and thoughtful recommendations as you are telling your story. So again, you know, I am big on, I write, the biggest place where I get a lot of, you know, inspiration and tools and information are through various points that are valuable, you know, and just a list here are some of the areas I go to, you know, I connect to, I will subscribe to a lot of white papers, as you see here, just to get their white papers or their information, because if I can, you know, get or extrapolate one idea or one thought or a way of looking at things differently, you know, it could help you really, again, understanding, you know, what's important. How can I look at this to make your story a better one, to help it be more articulate as you are trying to position yourself with that senior leadership team and asking for either more money, more resources, or why is engagement important? You know, these are just some really valuable resources that could potentially help you. That does conclude my presentation portion of today. So if we could, I guess, you know, I can look into, you know, the questions,
Yeah.
or I don't know how we want to navigate the questions at this point.
Michelle, I'm on as well. You can hear me?
Yep.
Yes, so we are getting questions, and I would like to start simply by asking you, given your expertise and all the work you've done around, as you just said, you know, tracking the data so you can know the information and use it, knowing that we are trying to build something that is going to be across employers. And obviously you've mentioned throughout the presentation how many surveys you've filled out. We are mindful that we don't want to make our need to collect data onerous. And so if you have any thoughts on the particular data points that we are going to be ultimately needing to track, like internships and local hires and diversity demographics, if you have any recommendations for us, I would welcome those.
I think the biggest survey, or maybe an area again, is just surveying, you know, the effectiveness of all of those processes, you know, to be able to go back to those individuals to understand, you know, in order to make improvements, if you want to, you know, get more candidates and things of that nature, you know, it's really going back and surveying those individuals that have gone through that process, again, to start to pick apart, again, you know, all those efforts that you are putting into place, and are they really working? You know, to, again, expend your time wisely and stop doing things that may be ineffective or make things better. You don't want to over survey because people get survey exhaustion. But when you are surveying it, making it very easy, very simple for those to take it. I don't know if there are other data points you need to collect, but definitely going back and surveying those who've gone through the process can only help you moving forward with whatever your goals are.
Thank you. Allison, I am having a little bit of technical difficulty seeing the questions. I'm wondering if you could read a question for me.
Absolutely. All right, Michelle, our first question in the questions panel, and just a quick reminder to our audience, if you do have questions for Michelle, please submit them in that questions box you see in the right-hand panel. Our first question is, what challenges have you seen getting top management to embrace these techniques?
Yeah, I mean, I have come across that probably earlier in my stages of my career. It is of no shock and or surprise that you do have senior leaders who sit up top and will say things like, the touchy-feely crap doesn't matter, or give me the data. I don't believe it. They don't really see the parallels and the high correlation between an engaged workforce with improvement of that engagement. It is very, very unfortunate. It makes it very difficult for HR practitioners or OD practitioners to really make significant and meaningful impact on engagement levels when you don't have your leadership buy-in. We in HR, we create all these platforms. We create the processes. There are only things that we can really do within the span of our control. But when you are talking about engagement, you have to, I cannot stress the importance of getting that senior leadership buy-in, that why engagement is important, because at the end of the day, it is HR job to create all these platforms, but it is the leadership's job to execute them and to execute them well. That is where the rubber meets the road. And when you have a senior leadership team or managers who do not buy into it, it makes your job extremely difficult, and it happens. And I have been very selective in my last two, whether it be medical service company or even currently today in my role, that through my interviewing process, I selected, and accepted those roles because I had through my interviewing process, the buy-in. They understood that our workforce is our greatest asset and why engagement is really important and what does that really mean. And it is really very sad and it's unfortunate that you still you have senior leaders that don't buy into it, and it's going to make it very difficult. And I've said to other HR practitioners, you need to move on, or you're going to be really, really frustrated. Or you need to just thoroughly accept that they are not accepting that philosophy, and you got to focus your energies on where you can make impact.
Thank you, Allison. I'm back. I can manage from this point forward. Michelle, the next question is, what are some of the methods that you use or have heard of others using to benchmark and measure the performance of, quote, informal, unquote, training?
That would be an internal survey. Again, from an informal, that means like internal, that is like on the job training. You have to go back, those who have, gone through that process of that informal training, you've got to go back to those and survey, and ask the leadership, how do they believe the internal training is coming along? Is it preparing them? Are you giving the resources? Are you giving them enough time? And really the benchmarking is going to come from internal, and that can only come from those who have gone through it. Again, and understanding where your shortfalls are or what you're doing really well today to make those improvements and to keep moving forward to making that process on that informal side much more effective for the informal training process. But your benchmarks are going to come from those surveys that you do internally.
Another question is trying to get a pulse on the trend of employers at this stage of the game, recognizing that pandemic is creating all sorts of challenges, but investments in training. What are you seeing in the grand scheme in terms of investments in education and training, given what we on the workforce side know are skills gaps that might not only just pertain to folks you're trying to acquire and attract, but who may be working for you? So to what extent are your incumbent workers getting trained?
Yeah, they're being trained differently. I mean, you really have to switch your model. No one is holding training in person, very slim. So, you know, looking into those virtual and online opportunities. You know, we enrolled in like a Udemy, you know, to really go, you have to look on to those self-paced online resources that are available, like a Udemy. Awesome and amazing platform. Again, a good idea. I had a leader that was struggling with just recently, like with professional and business writing. And, you know, again, finding a platform like a Udemy when in-house training is not being conducted, you know, going to a Udemy platform and enrolling people, and because it's very vast. So looking into there, or looking into, you know, a lot of other platforms. Ours is very industry specific. So we actually record a lot of our training. So we record a lot of our trainings that are going on today online, and then sharing that back out with staff. But we've had to switch our model into employing like a Udemy in order to identify that, you know, when those skill gaps are occurring, finding the best solution for them online.
Thank you, Michelle. I think we're rounding home here. I want to thank you for joining us today. It's a long time coming. I certainly learned a lot. I think half the battle in education and workforce working with companies is striking that common language. And so you definitely introduced some new terminology to me personally that I had not heard in my years of working with folks. So thank you very much for helping expand our collective intelligence on the use of data in your world. We find it to be very germane to the kind of work we want to do as a collective. So thanks again to all of you for participating. I am going to adjourn this meeting. Thanks to all our co-chairs, to Craig. And again, if anybody's interested in learning more about the IT sector partnership, please don't hesitate to reach out directly to Craig. So thank you all. Have a wonderful day and a very happy and safe Thanksgiving.
Thank you.